right one? Okay.
Music needed to be down for that.
They're telling us to start.
I guess we'll
I'm
see.
running timer, Brian. So
Okay,
just
thank
wait for
you.
me to turn red.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Cash Flow and ROI panel today. Really excited to have you here. Sure, you can clap. More than one person can clap. This is okay. So, real quick, I'll just introduce our speakers here. I'm Brian Cohen from KickAMSAds.com, and we've got a five-figure-a-month romance author, Quinn Ward. We've got six-figure romance author, Alex Liddell. We've got business manager to the stars, Joe Solari. And we've got seven-figure poetry author, Pierre-Alex Ginty. So, we will definitely have time for questions. We're going to try to keep it short. I want you to think right now, if I had a question about money in and money out, what would it be? I want you to take a second to think about it, because if I'm in my ideal world here, I think I am. I think this is the right timeline as opposed to the bad timeline. I want to think that 10 people will ask questions today at that microphone. So, help me live out my dreams. So, I'm just going to start with some softballs here, and we can go this way, but then we'll mix it up so that it's not always starting on you, Quinn. And you've got your mic. You guys are sharing? Okay, cool. Test it up, test it up. Hey. Okay, cool. So, Quinn, what does it mean to you to have a positive return on investment?
Well, it's just, when you're spending less than what you're bringing in and growing it a little bit every month. So that's been the big thing for me, is taking that positive ROI and putting part of that into growth, as opposed to just putting it aside and saving it or spending it. Did that for years, where it was like just almost that paycheck to paycheck, and learning how to take that positive ROI and use it to build the business up instead.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, that counts as a checkbox. I'll give people a check mark if they had a good answer. No, just kidding. Yeah, I know. Sorry. All right.
I know. I didn't know I could copy off of you.
I know. This is being scored. Alex, what do you say? What is a positive ROI to you?
A positive ROI beyond, making more than you spend, is figuring out my opportunity costs, because I have very limited resources, not just financial, but also time-wise, figuring out the opportunity costs and saying, am I going to make more money if I spend this hour writing, or if I spend this hour, playing with Facebook ad copy? And when I make more money for that hour writing, then I need to hire somebody to make that ad copy for me, and figuring out that opportunity cost, because there's a cost to everything, to make the most.
Awesome. Thank you. Checkbox. No.
So what does ROI mean to me?
What does ROI mean to you?
Yeah. So I really look at this whole thing as a business. We're in the business of getting investors a return on what they put in. So even though you're writing books and you're doing something you love, if this is going to be a publishing business, you have to make sure that you're getting that return, not just on the money that's being invested in the business, but your time. And any business, not just this business, all businesses, that's their purpose, is to create a return on whatever's getting put back into them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Smiley face, check. What do I get?
Yeah. Oh, did that? Yeah, I said I did an air check. It was like an air quote, but with a check. It's a thing. All right, Pierre.
So I'm going to just add to what Joe said. For us, obviously, I run a direct sale model. We're always measuring, what we spend and what we bring in. However, for me, there's one other factor. It's more of who we bring in terms of ROI, because sometimes So a lot of the customers, what we've been trying to do is make more money on the back end because we're able to funnel people like Amazon. So I always talk about AOV, average order value, and also LTV, lifetime value of that customer. So the ROI, we do measure it on the front end. However, we also consider the back end because they can spend more. They may come for a $14 book and eventually spend $100, $200 on the back end. So those are the factors we consider. But anytime we're in the positive, it's a good ROI. But sometimes when we're in the negative, we look at the long run.
Awesome. That's really helpful. And that's why you're here. You've got a different feel than just the Amazon people, which is great. So this is going to go to you, Pierre. So I know you've been in this situation. Let's say, and this hopefully will appeal to everybody a little bit. Let's say you had a great month. You had a great month of book sales, like $500 plus, and it's awesome. And you spent a couple $100 to get there, which is awesome. I mean, you spent less than you made. But Amazon in particular isn't going to give you that money right away. It's not going to give you that money for 60 days. But you spent the money now, or maybe it'll pay off on your credit card bill at some point in the next 30 days. So they're in a positive direction, but right now at about negative $300. So what is an author to do when this kind of split is happening for pretty much everybody in the author world who is using Amazon? What do you think, Pierre?
So for the first 4 years, I did use Amazon, and that was one of the reasons I went into direct sale. One of the reasons. The one thing I did throughout that time was I utilized credit, whether it was a credit card, where if you're running Facebook ads actually allow you to have a revolving credit line with them. Now, there's different tiers to it. So when I started, we were spending $500. When we started consistently doing that, what Facebook allowed us to do is, give us a threshold of $1,000 a month. So it was that it became to where it was up to $10,000 a month where I could spend that and I have 30 days. I had till the end of the month to pay that bill. So what ended up happening is all the cycles eventually, came in sync. So, I spent, let's say, just to use your example, I spent $200, and when I was marketing, the return for that month was $300. However, I never used my full credit line with them. So the next month, let's say I use the other $200, and I allow now that it gives enough time for whatever else is supposed to come in, then I pay that bill. So I don't know if that makes sense. I do see people understanding it, but try to find the best way, the best places to give you some form of capital, like in advance. I started with my credit card. I use a Facebook credit line, like I mentioned. And even for my direct sale model, I use every company we can. Even from book printing, we get boatload for a while. It's too long.
No, it's okay.
But everything, even the material, we always use some form of credit line because, again, our industry, you rotate around 60 days and 90 days. And fortunately for me, that's why the direct sale model works.
Awesome. Keep it going back down the horn. I won't rate answers anymore. They're all 10s from
Okay.
these guys.
So, Brian, I think that this is probably the single biggest issue that any business faces, and it's something that we really focus on a lot. And the way I try to frame it is it's finding the right growth rate, right? And just when you're beginning as an author, you have to figure out how you're going to make the most of the money that you have as the investor. You're running a startup and you've put whatever money it is, let's say it's $5,000 to get your books produced. That's a finite amount of money. That has to get you to the point where you are starting to get some kind of positive cash flow. I see a lot of authors that come to work with Lisa and I that the dirty secret is like, hey, I had my best year ever top line growth, but I'm making less than I've ever made. and it's because the business starts running the show instead of them running the show. And where I'm going with this is that the magic happens is when you start to think about how you're planning that cash flow and how you're managing that growth. Because what happens is that you like, oh, I got some money that's come in, I'm seeing good results, I'm gonna go all in again and again. And then all of a sudden it's like, but I can't pay my Netflix bill. What happened? It's because all that money is out on the street working. And eventually it'll come back. But if you want less stress and you want to have a business that's not going to have these massive swings, planning that cash flow and staying where you have a reserve and you're staying, within your ski tips, you're going to have just a better operating business. Will it maybe take a little bit longer? Probably not, because if you're having these big swings and you find yourself in a position where an opportunity presents itself and you don't have that cash, you're going to miss that opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes. To me, I don't know. Does it make sense to you guys? Okay, awesome. Alex?
I use an alternative model. So start with $1,000 of seed money. So that is going to be money I've pre-put aside to start my project. And after that, I use a cash basis, meaning that the money I have to spend this month is the money that I took in this month. So.
All right, and for me, a lot of it came down to when I first started, we didn't even have credit cards. And so it came down to what can I cut back in my daily life in order to get this project done? And it came down to setting up a timeline for this is when I need a cover, this is when I need this is when I need that. And just budgeting that out the same as you would anything else that you need to do, like with home repairs or anything. And then as the money starts rolling in, like I said before, part of it goes into like a reserves, and then the rest of it, I'm like, okay, what do I need to reinvest this money into? And it'll be, this is the project that's going on right now, these are the ads, these are this, that, and everything else that I have to pay out. And over time, doing that time and time again, eventually built up enough that, like with Alex saying about the time management as well, that was able to start paying for those things so that now I have time to do the things that are actually going to grow the business.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you guys some specific questions for each of you, and then we will get into questions. If you have ever had a problem with cash flow, you should be getting in this line right now, because you should ask about your specific situation. So if no one got in here, I'm going to assume that you're all saying you have been very profitable your entire author life and have never had an issue. Thank you. Honesty right here. Let's give him a round of applause. Awesome. So start lining up, because I want to go through 10 plus questions. So you'll be next. So you're just standing in place right now. Don't worry about it. But guys, come over and ask specific questions. We've got over $4 million a year in gross sales on this panel. Do you really want your life to have gone by without asking some of these people's questions? Yes, and I did say people's. Okay. I'm going to ask specific questions. Quinn, what is the number one problem you have seen authors have when they are doing their Amazon ads and trying to figure out their cash flow and profitability?
Honestly, one of the big things is panicking. They see that they're spending or might potentially spend this money, and they think it's going to keep going at that level all the time, and don't think about the things. Just stop and slow down and be like, is this actually a problem, or can I make this work? And figuring out how the books are performing and looking beyond just the ads to know, am I actually making more than what I'm seeing from here? Because I recently did a test where I stopped my ads to kind of prove it. Jen's like still shaking her head at me about that one. And yeah, even though I only lost about 10% of sales based on what Amazon ads said, my sales daily went down by over 50%. Yeah, it was painful.
Alex, my question to you is, you talked about, okay, I could be doing this task that is worth this dollar amount per hour, or I could be doing this task, which is this dollar amount per hour. What should an author think about as far as the value of their time with these certain tasks, because I think a lot of authors say, oh, well, I know I could probably pay someone to do this for $14 an hour, but I have to do it myself. It must be me. Like, how do you figure out how valuable your time actually is? I know.
Excellent question. No, that's
That is a
perfect
big question.
All right. Look at how, ultimately we're writers. Look at how many hours a day can you logically be productive before you get diminishing returns. For me, after 4 hours, I hit diminishing returns. Now look at your life and see your writing time. Is that more than you can be productive or less than your productivity time? Something is going to give, you're going to pay always. Whether you're paying with money or with time, you will pay. So first figure out, do you have the time to do it? If you have 8 hours a day to be doing stuff and you're only productive writing 4 hours, great. What is the most effective use for those 4? If you are productive writing 6 hours a day, but you only have 5, something is going to have to give. Either make yourself more productive writing, so you have time to do all those things, or you start saying, you're looking at your release schedule, and you're saying, in order for me to make my release, I have to dedicate this time to writing. So the short answer is realizing that your time is a limited resource, that you cannot keep borrowing from real life. Calculate just how limited that resource is, and then you can make a decision on whether to outsource at that point, understanding that it's not easy to outsource something like ads. Other people are just not going to care as much about your book as you are. The question I ask is, if they're doing it as well as I am or just a little worse, is it still saving my sanity? For me, I find that when I go into ad space, my mind goes out of writing space. And if I have a limited amount of time in writing space, I can't afford for that mind to be elsewhere. And so there's some acceptance of, is this good enough for what I need? Ideally, it's much better than I can do, but I also make that calculation. If it was only as good as I could do it, or even a little worse, would it still be worth it? Arithmetic there.
Awesome. Great answer. All right, Joe, to you. So the lightning round now. This is going to be a two-parter, though. Beginner authors who come to you, what's usually the number one thing they need to focus on? And more intermediate authors who are earning a decent amount, maybe over $2,000 a month, what is the number one thing they need to focus on?
Sure. So I think this is something I've always talked about. You're running a startup business, and as a beginning author, you've got this finite amount of capital, and while there's lots of shiny objects to spend money on, there's only a few things that you need to be spending money on. And really, you have to focus on that business has to get a product into the market to determine if it has a product to sell, and it needs to get customers, right? That every business needs both of those parts of that equation. So the money that you do have needs to go into your cover and into your editing, everything you can to make a good quality product and get that into the market. Going from there, and we start moving up, then you really try to build a system that is accumulating funds and fans, and this whole idea of these resources kind of feed on themselves. You need money to go find new fans. Funny thing is when you get a new fan, they give you money. And so what you want to do is you really want to be focused in on how you can build positive feedback loops in your business that create fans that are going to stick around. Because one of the things that I've found in looking at author businesses is that the hard part is you have to have this base audience for each launch. So in the beginning, you have a small audience. It's a few people. When you do that first launch and you pick up, maybe it's just one more person that becomes a fan, it's a little bit bigger, and that means it's the next launch is going to be a little bit better. And you making sure that that money goes into that feedback loop of trying to make sure that you're retaining and nurturing that audience from launch to launch.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So we'll do one for you, Pierre, and then we'll go to our brave first volunteer before the remainder of those folks. And don't worry, if we run out of questions, I'll have some. So, Pierre, one of the ways, obviously, as you already said, that to get around this 60-day revolving loop where Amazon holds on to your money is to sell directly, where you get paid immediately. What are the benefits of selling directly off your own website, and what are the biggest challenges that you face?
There are a lot of benefits to it. The main thing for me was controlling my data, because the first 4 years, I've been a full-time author since 2014, and the first 4 years, I've grown a huge audience and sold a lot of books. However, I had no way of communicating directly with the buyers. Unless someone went on my Instagram or email us and said, we've purchased a book from Amazon, we had no way of communicating with them. And I also tried building an email list. Now, this may step on some toes. I tried building an email list with the whole idea of giving something for free and grabbing their emails. However, my issue is I needed to know who the buyers are and only build a quality email list, because it's expensive, especially when you start getting a lot of people on there. It gets more and more expensive. So with this model, it allowed me to not only sell and collect cash quicker on a daily basis, but also put me in a position to collect their data and sell more to them, which is the other benefit. Is more of, instead of just book series or just 1 or 2 books, I can now sell them T-shirts, coffee mugs, other merchandise. So it opened a world of opportunity for me, and even in terms of branding. Now, the downside of it, there is more expenses up front. And that's why earlier I mentioned the whole idea of building some form of credit line with whatever company you're using, because it's like right now my warehouse probably has over 100,000 books sitting. I'm waiting for the holidays, so that came out of my pocket. There's certain things we had to delegate, which was needed. So it's more upfront. Sometimes I can tell you, sometimes I'm like, it can be easier if I just write the book, put it there, sell, collect royalties. However, the longevity and building a business, which Joe talked about, was my focus, and this model allows me to do that.
Awesome, thank you very much. So what I'd like folks in line to do, we've got instructions 2 ways here. So what I'd like folks in line to do, I'd like you to say your name, what you write, and ask your question, and stick around, because if you have a follow-up question, I want you to be able to ask that rather than going back to your seat and saying, darn. You guys, raise your hand if you want that answer, if you want to answer that question, and then if anybody has any follow-up, you can. It doesn't have to be like, oh, every person nice in line is going to have to give an answer to every question. You don't have to do that. So, awesome. First and foremost.
Is this already on? Okay, good. My name is Justin Stewart. I don't have anything written. I just market my wife's sweet romance books. She just has one out right now. But my question is, I guess from the business models, at what point did you guys kind of decide, like, hey, I need to do an LLC versus a sole proprietorship in order to kind of make sure that once we get to a higher, whatever this income level is, I need to start making sure I be prepared for taxes. And I know, especially with the direct sales, I'm sure there's a lot more international and stuff like that. But at what point, or did you just start off that way? Like, how did you set up your business part in order to kind of help out with your book stuff?
Joe? Oh, did it turn off? Oh, that's why we've got 2.
All right. Yeah. So this gets back to what I said earlier about where you deploy your money. What state do you live in?
I'm in the military, and right now my state is Maryland, but
Okay.
I'm a resident in
So
Texas.
if you give $150 to Maryland to set up a company, are they going to help you promote a book?
No.
No. Okay. No more questions, Your Honor. The reason I bring that up is that's how you got to think about this stuff. It gets to kind of what Alex was talking about, of like evaluate what that money could be used for. Could it be used better for a better book cover, a better this, a better that? My rule of thumb is, and being in the military, you're going to have some kind of mushy tax stuff that would, and again, you can set up a call with me for free to talk about this stuff. Depending, just as a rule of thumb, if you're making about $50,000 and you're having over $10,000 in profit after your expenses, it starts to make sense to create a company, right, and set it up as an S corp. But with that comes you have to start paying a salary, and you have to start filing extra stuff, which becomes kind of, a bummer to have to be doing that. But at that point is where you start to cross that line where there's a tax benefit. At least that's what I've seen. When you get above that, then it makes even more sense. Now, if your wife's writing how to juggle chainsaw books, you probably want to think about an LLC right away, because there's like liability, and that has nothing to do with taxes, because if you just set up an LLC, the tax profile is identical. It's not until you start doing things like converting it to an S corp that it makes sense. I hope that was succinct enough.
I think that was.
Okay.
Yes, do you have any follow-ups?
Oh no, that was the other thing which you already kind of talked about, was the liability in case you got sued for copyright infringement or something like that, just to protect your personal assets from your company assets, I guess.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about corporations in the United States, I know there's international people here, so I'll just be focused on, it's set up at the state level. It has both state and federal properties to it around liability and the separation of assets, so that the assets and liability of your company aren't yours, but sort of, because probably your biggest asset, well, we hope your biggest asset's gonna be this company, right? Again, for authors, you mentioned the copyright piece. Even if you have a company, you're going to want to register those copyrights in your wife's personal name. It's a really funky asset, and it's got some really powerful things to it, but it's also going to be a huge pain in your ass. And that gets to how you do some stuff around that legally with your company, but it's too much for this. But really, like I said, unless you have something that you're worried about, because I've had people talk to me about this where they're doing how-to stuff and they are taking on some liability and offering advice to their books, then it really makes sense to have that LLC set up, and to spend $150 in Maryland to do that makes sense. Tax-wise, it's not going to save you any more money, and the reason you're doing it is because you're trying to protect yourself from your, DIY flamethrower design books.
Yeah, I'll probably come find you afterwards to talk about it.
Awesome. All right, come on up next. Your name and what you write and your question, please.
Hi, I'm Garen Sue Walker. I write Cozy Mysteries. I'm working on my second series now, and I'm in I'm one of the lucky people that have more time than money. I retired. I couldn't really afford to retire, but I did it anyway and went, I'll have more time to write books. So surprisingly, I was surprised that I can't write books as fast as I thought, because like Alex said, you can only write, each of us have so much time that and I'm trying to get better at that. But my question, if I can remember my question,
It's okay, take your
is,
time.
so I'm about where I feel like I can level up. And so I have maybe a couple $100 a month to spend, and so there's so much. Like, do I go over here and learn this and learn that? And I'm best when I can focus. So do you guys have advice? Like, I have a great mailing list. I've got invested in good covers, all those things, editing. And where would you, if you have a moderate amount of money, where would you feel like if you could focus on one thing? Is that?
Yes,
does that make
that's
sense?
good. I think Quinn or Alex, who wants it?
Okay, if I understood your question correctly, the question is, you have several series out, you have the time to invest in learning how to do something, and you have some limited amount of money to invest in learning how to do this thing.
Thank
So
you.
what is, at this point, where could you invest it? Okay, at this point, I would look at investing in two things simultaneously. First is your online social presence and your network of peers, which takes a lot of time to develop and cultivate. And from that network, you're going to be able to set up some, I hate the word free because it's not free, you're using your time, promotions such as cross advertising. I will promote and signal boost your book at your launch, you can do it for me at my launch. So you're going to be making those connections, connections directly with readers. There is an amazing six-figure author here who does it without spending money on advertising, but she is not doing it for free. She is going on Facebook and interacting with readers all the time. So I would take that time and invest there first. I would secondly, if after that you still have time left over because you're not making it, if you have several series out, several books, now I would start looking at advertising. I would say that until you have 3 books in a series, it's going to be difficult for you to get that return on investment. But if you do have that and you have the time, I would start learning the advertising system. Pick one system to start with, learn it, and use that. You're going to need those few $100s to learn. So before you're going to make money, you're going to need that to learn, and set yourself aside a couple of months where you're going to learn.
Okay.
All right, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
sure thing. Good job. All right, name, what you write, and your question, please.
Very short. I had to move the microphone. My name is J.R. Wesley, and I actually co-write with Connor Peterson. We're in urban fantasy, supernatural, romance, kind of a mashup. But we're right at the point where we've been doing this for a few years. Anytime we launch a book, we end up with a decent influx of money. The series we're working on right now, we're about to do our 3rd book, which is where I feel like, and I appreciate hearing the repeat of when you hit that 3rd book in a series, you can probably really start moving forward with things. The question being, I've been definitely struggling with like Amazon ads. Like we spend like $30 and earn 1. Facebook ads seem like I really am struggling to build our audience. And obviously our newsletter is only so-so. It's just overwhelming at times to be able to figure out what to spend my time on or what to spend our money on. So, which I'm sure is like everybody in this room. But so a specific question being, if I had to look at things to be able to evaluate, are we getting back what we should be for putting money in? What's the threshold? Because like I said, I can do the data, and I've done Brian's your ad course, the 5-day challenge anyway. And like I like the idea of looking at, we put in this much money, we got this much back. What are some good thresholds I should be looking for, honestly? Because I have no good gauge based on our own stuff.
Awesome, thank you. I think, Quinn, this might be to you. It's like I'm being quizzed up here. Which person
Yes.
would be the best fit? Yes.
So this is one of those things where, first of all, I would say, where you've done the 5-day challenge and everything, and like I mentioned with how my sales dropped when I paused all my ads,
yes.
Are you actually spending $30 to make 1? Because if you are, that really signals either a problem with your sales page and your product or your targeting. Okay, so that's one thing that you can analyze and possibly fix things. And the nice thing there is, if there is a problem, the data is going to show you that, okay?
Yeah.
But then the other thing is making sure that you're putting the money where it's going to make the most sense. So there are times where if I know I'm not converting the way that I want, I will pull things back. Just pull those levers back, figure out what the problem is, where I need to make the fix, and then that's where the money goes, is into that fix. Okay? But
Yeah.
just don't just look at the numbers and be like, well, this is what this says, so that's obviously what it is, if you know that it's not necessarily that.
Okay, so just to be clear, so I'm understanding that saying we're spending 30 and making 1 is not a good threshold, and I definitely need to, and my assumption is it's our targeting that's the problem. So your suggestion would be to figure out who our audience is better and how to reach them online, and that's where I should be spending my time.
Right.
Okay.
Just make sure that you're reaching the right readers.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to reach out and sell your product to the wrong audience, you're never going to hit that profitability that you want to hit.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome, thank you. And I will just say as my own follow-up to that, so I know some of you were in my talk earlier today, sometimes the Amazon ad dashboard is an unreliable narrator. You don't really know what it's saying there, and sometimes, I know you had said you've been making a decent amount per book that you've put out. Sometimes you could see an ad that looks like it's doing very poorly, that when you turn it off, like Quinn did with theirs, these ads that were doing terribly were actually propping up your sales. So just something to consider. Awesome, thank you. Hi, name and
name is
what you
Shan-
write and question.
Okay, my name is Shannon. I write contemporary romance, and I haven't launched my first ones yet. They're still at the editor and stuff. My question, you've answered some of them already, so thank you. But one of my questions is, I know a lot of times we talk about people being on a shoestring budget or put all of it into one area. I am lucky enough I have enough of a budget. I guess I want to know from you guys. I'm an entrepreneur, so I know how you got to invest money in order to get stuff back out. I have a little bit more cushion than maybe the average person of what I could spend, but I don't want to throw good money after bad or, do all the things. So I guess my question is for my first one, for like paying for the editing and all the different book funnels and all the different things, what is an average you would say if I'm going to put out like a 3-book series, like per book, or maybe even for the whole series? What is a good amount, a reasonable amount, maybe not a beginner amount, maybe an intermediate amount that you could put out that would give you the highest ROI?
That's a good
Does that make
question.
sense?
Yes, it does. I think that could be a Joe question, even though it could be an Alex because you haven't done one yet. But I think it's a Joe question.
So one thing that might be a help, if you go to my website, joesolari.com, there's a thing called the Author Capital Planner. It's a free tool.
Okay.
And you can go there and you can plug in all these different numbers. And what I think is important for folks in thinking about this is that startup perspective. Don't get too tied into the launch. The launch is the building block, but a business that's starting, doesn't matter what industry, a startup business typically takes 3 to 5 years to break even. So do you have a 3 to 5 year cash flow plan?
Okay.
And can you afford to do it? Now, you said you're in a position where you've got some money you can budget aside, but this is maybe for some of the other folks, is like, if you do that and you lay it out and you say like, oh, based on what I figured out here, this is going to cost me $5,000. I don't have $5,000. You're at a point now where you've got a choice. You can go into a doomed plan that's going to fail and make you depressed because you're going to run out of money, or you can say, hey, now I can look at this a different way. I'm going to need a little extra time to save that money. It gives me a little more time to write the books. I don't have this urgency to like rapid release. I can kind of store up the writing. I might not be able to afford to get it edited, but I got the time that I can be writing while I'm saving the money, right?
So but that's what everyone talks about is the bootstrapping.
Yeah.
I'm saying I have less time and more money available.
Yeah.
And I just haven't heard anyone yet speak to that of like,
Right.
And I've been talking to other friends, and they are averaging about $5K with their like audiobook, their editing, a decent, a good book cover, like everything kind of done professional, but not over the top. So I'm like, is that a reasonable amount, like 5 or?
Yeah, so what I've seen, again, it shifts a little bit based on genre and what you need to expend on a cover, because if you're like trying to be a professional in military science fiction, you're probably gonna be spending $1,000 or more on a cover. Whereas maybe something like contemporary romance, you could get away with a pre-made that would be a couple $100. That's something you gotta figure out, like, what you do the research so you understand what the genre requires, and then you're going to have to spend to that. The next piece is the editing piece. You maybe are going to have to spend more when you're beginning, right? It's not just thinking about it as an editor, but kind of like a coach. And if you've got grammar like mine, you're always going to be spending a lot on editors. It's just, that's the deal.
I've budgeted for a developmental and a copy and a line edit, so.
But if you're in a situation where you're thinking $3,000 to $5,000 a book is something that you can deal with, and that you're setting aside that for 3 books in a series, like a lot of times what I've seen when a launch fails, it's because the premise is, I'm going to write book 1 in this thing that I call an epic fantasy trilogy, with the expectation that book 1 is going to fund book 2 and 3. That failed the day you thought that plan up, right? Because we know, especially those of us in the room that are big readers, you see that, and it might be a compelling cover and story, and you want to read it, but you're not coming back until that series is, at least book 2's out and book 3's on pre-order. Most likely I'm going to wait until the 3rd one's out and I see some reviews, and then I'm going to take my personal risk, because it's, again, I got to risk. I only can read so many books in my lifetime. Am I going to risk it on yours?
Got it.
That help?
Yeah, no, that does. And mine isn't like 10 series like a military sci-fi would be. Contemporary romance doesn't usually go that long. And I know it's a competitive market for advertising. So I guess my question to Alex is, like, how do you know when you're overspending or underspending? Like, is there like a course or someone you think I should talk to later about like return the ROI on in a competitive area, like a very competitive with a lot of traditional publishers in that space?
And we'll have to move on to the next
Yeah.
person
Yeah,
after
I'm very
you.
sorry. Can we
Yeah,
talk,
we'll talk to you later.
offline
Yeah, yeah.
on that?
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right. Name, genre, and question, please.
Thanks. I'm Brett Monk, and I write in young adult mystery and also fantasy sci-fi. Basically, my focus is telling stories to teenage girls and their moms. That's kind of my market because I have a teenage girl, and I'm trying to write books that a mom might see and say, "Oh, I want my daughter to read that," and she would actually like it. And so my question has to do with your build order. As you guys have started with where we all start and gotten to where you are now, could you talk to me a little more about the stages where this was the point where I saw that I needed to I needed to start leveraging some of my time? What were the things that you found were the first easiest things to leverage and to get off of your plate? What are the things that you would absolutely never let go of, and why?
Pierre, I think this would be a good one for you because the genre is similar to yours. Like, it's in the same realm.
So the question is more about delegating when the right time and so forth. For me, it was a hard thing, and it was, I think it's how she mentioned earlier. Once I started looking at, okay, I have 8 hours in a day. I need this amount of time to write, this amount of time to run ads, and me, I'm more of a marketer than anything. So if I'm gonna spend 4 hours on Facebook ads, 2 hours writing, and another hour on managing social media, can I get someone to help me with the social media aspect? So the first step for me was getting an assistant, and it was when I did it, it was just like, okay, I need help, and I cannot achieve this all throughout the day. And sometimes you also have to look at, I guess, it's not your success rate. You have to look at everything as a whole and say, where am I lacking, or even what are my weaknesses? Although, focus more on your strength, because Joe and Brian can tell you communication might be my weakness. And that was one of the things. Instead of handling emails or communicating with whoever, I just pass it over to my assistant. So it's just really sitting down and assessing yourself and saying, what am I going to do? And also too, to make it quick, but also too, you can find people that are not as expensive as you think. You have freelancers like Upwork and Fiverr where you could, sometimes it's giving it a try and seeing like, hey, is this something that I can take off my plate? And if I can't, take it back.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Yes, we're going to have one last question. The last folks just come up to the speakers after, and because I want to have time for final thoughts. Yes.
So I'm Trish Jolly, and my husband is the author. So I'm going to be trying to help him with all the contracts and promotion and all those things. And so I've learned a lot here, and like one of my key takeaways so far has been like, kind of don't worry about it, because if you screw it up, you can always redo it later. But at the same token, he is planning to write a series of at least 3 to 5 books. And one of my main concerns is, how much do you need to be concerned about keeping the same editor or the same cover artist through your series, like for consistency's sake and stuff? Do you need to wait until you can afford to really pay both those people for more than one book? Or do you just kind of go with it and hope that you can still use those people? Because I've heard kind of some terror stories about people being ghosted and different things, and it sort of being a nightmare.
I think Quinn or Alex, whoever gets the mic first.
I don't find a need to, a vetted editor is a vetted editor. So I don't worry about that. They should be able to pick that up. In terms of covers, I like for covers to be booked well ahead of time. So no, you shouldn't worry about that. You should, but ideally you have those covers book ahead of time and you have all those covers ready to go by the time those books come out. Also consider the fact that you may, if a series is not selling, need to recover the series.
Right. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you very much. All right, let's do some final thoughts. So, last thought, and we'll have to make it quick because we're at the end of time. But the last thought will go from you, Quinn, to start. So, final thoughts on how you start thinking about cash flow as you continue on with your next project. The next thing to focus on.
So really, the big thing is to just, when you're starting out, don't necessarily, like I think it was Shannon who brought up the audio and the this and the that. And there are times when those things are nice, but if you aren't able to find all of that, are these things essential to the success of the business? Because that's another thing that I found a lot is we get into the bells and whistles of things and things that don't actually matter.
Awesome. Alex?
Leave this conference with at least 3 names of people who are at your level in your genre, who are your fellow travelers, and start keeping in touch with them and compare notes. It will save you money.
That's probably the best thing I've heard as far as like build your peer network here. But quickly, if you're evaluating any kind of decision in your business, use some type of methodology. And I think that if you had $100 to invest, you could put that money in the stock market. And if whatever you're going to do with that money in your business, will it give you a better return? And then will that return outweigh the risk you're about ready to take? Because that's really what this is about. And it may be a case where while it's got a wild ROI, but it's wildly risky. And if you've got the guts to do it, then do it, because that's how entrepreneurship works, is there's a risk reward. And all I'm trying to help you do in that is kind of have some way to measure it in reality against something that is less risky, like putting money in the stock market. Thanks.
Awesome. And Pierre?
And for me, it's, I guess, don't be afraid, because you're building a business. I keep mentioning that you should get resources, whether capital or whatever it is. The one thing I learned over the last few years, or just with this model, is that a lot of businesses go outside of themselves for resources to make their business happen. And if you see that you have something that can happen, that can work, again, the ROI will be there, or there is a future in there, don't be afraid of going, it's me learning there's an idea of good debt and bad debt. Now, I'm not telling everyone go get debt, but what I'm saying is that your business, sometimes the investment that it takes for you to get to the next level is outside of yourself.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause for all our panelists today.